One thing that was specific to you though is we wanted to know, how did you get the name Sir Wick?
Yeah, we'll get that.
Everyone wants to know that.
I know there's a story there, so the our audience will love that. You know.
So there's it's a. I guess you want the loquacious answer. Let me try to truncate it some. So my harp teacher, who is actually Michigan alum with her undergrad and master's, Patricia Terry Ross, a fine harpist, called me Sir Chadius all through high school.
Okay.
And kind of my surrogate mother also used to call me Sir Chadwick. And every now and then she would just slip and say Sir Wick. So we were playing a basketball game. And everybody knew my love for jazz also. So in jazz, many people had royal stage names, you know. The guy say, "What's your name?" It's like Bill Basie. Oh, that sucks. We're gonna call you Count Basie, you know.
Right.
And then Duke Ellington and Earl Hines. You know, everybody had these, even though that was his name, but everybody had these real names. So Miss Allen, who was my band director, Sharon Allen, said, "We need to give you a nickname." And Brad, who was my surrogate mother's son, so basically my brother, so it was like, well, my mother called him Sir Chadwick or Sir Wick. And she's like, Wick, yeah, that's what we're gonna call you. Sir Wick.
Sir Wick.
And that's kind of name stuck. So there's plenty of Chads, but there's only one Sir Wick.
Yeah, well, that's true. Actually, you throw that in there and your name is entirely unique. Your name is completely singular by having that in there. I always wondered if it was a stage name, or like a separated name. But I think you just prefer it in terms of formal settings. You like it to be one string.
One name, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That was something that I was like debating when I started putting things into print, you know, which started this whole thing off, you know. So, you know, but
it was kind of cool. Like even people in college, 20 years ago, when you say Sir, they remember me, you know.
Yeah, no, that's
like,
helpful.
Yeah, they're like Sir Wick, yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, and people have done that with names forever, you know. Like Prince, you know.
Oh yeah,
So,
exactly.
I mean, like it's just it. That's all it is, you know. So, but no, it's great. It's so great that we could connect over this, and you know, it was when they approached me and Liz to do this Night Notes program, you know, that it was really the first. It was really kind of the first thing that we did coming back, you know, even though we had moved over to this virtual format, and I'd been working with the artistic advisory team about how to handle these concerts and the format, and we got to record all this at Kirk in the Hills and in Bloomfield Hills, and you know, it's like the amazing setting there, and you'll see that in the video. You know, it was all set up already with a whole streaming system in the church itself, and I think it sounds really great there. But you know, when we had planned to do this recital, I think in May of last, or maybe it was May or June of last year, and it was all kind of starting to seem like it was going to happen. And then, you know, cases were going up; it was looking worse. You know, I remember like Liz and I it was impossible for us to rehearse a lot of these things, so we ended up kind of canning it at the time. You know, so it was so great that this was able to get back in the books, and it was the first performance back for the both of us together in person. I mean, since the last performance we had done, which may have been March a year ago, you know. So anyway, so this was a chance for us to really pull this piece out. This was on our docket, you know, and I've said many times, and you and I talked about the piece Slice when you sent it to me, you know. Programming for all of us these days is kind of like 2 years out sometimes, like just like orchestras, you know, and chamber music programs, it's like 2 years out. But you know, it was on my list, and I promised you I was going to get it on, and I was so happy that we were able to do it. And so maybe let's talk a little bit about the piece, you know. I don't know, maybe just some broad topics here, like what was your inspiration for writing this piece? I know it had origins as a violin piece.
So I've always wanted to write. I can't this being recorded, but I always wanted to write, you know, more melodical pieces for saxophones.
Yeah.
So I don't remember, Chad. There was this piece. This might have been your master's recital. And I think you had this piece that was on boards. It was so crazy. It might have been one of those crazy graphic type pieces, I think.
Maybe, yeah.
Was that your master's? I think that was
There
your
was
master's.
there was a concert I did where I played this Christian Lover piece called Steady Study on the Boogie, and it was on these big giant sheets.
Yes, yes.
And that was on a contemporary directions ensemble
concert. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So I remember that vividly. And I was like, is this what it takes to write for the saxophone? Now, mind you, at this time, I'm 19, 20 years old, right? So so the claxophone, let's say claxophone, that's a new word. The saxophone repertoire was just kind of a culture shock to me because it was just the hardest repertoire, pound for pound, in my opinion, in the classical literature. But I always wanted to write something that was, that someone like, a Tim, a Kellen, a Jay, a Tamer, could play, but it still would be someone like me who's basically a romantic composer. And so after I wrote, so the original piece, of course, was a piece I wrote for my wife. Okay. And then I realized one day, I was like, this might really work for saxophone one day. Right. And I did some sketches, and on a whim, I put it together and I just sent it to Tim. I was like, hey man, here's this piece, and I looked at the register, everything, and I put out some other pieces, some of the classic French pieces. I really looked at the repertoire, and then I listened to some of the I looked at the finger charts, and I looked at some altissimo fingerings. And I said, okay, this could probably work here, and that's kind of really what happened. It was just taking this and trying to see, because I think it was David Dosky actually wrote, say a piece with different instruments. And I say, well, let me try to see this work, because of course I know the lowest note is B flat, but the higher notes, it just depends on the person. So I just really tried to work and see what will be approachable, still ergonomic, not crazy, but still a challenge for the musician. And that was kind of like the driving force behind it.
Yeah, okay, so that's kind of a little bit of your writing process, I suppose, right? I mean, you're really kind of hands-on in that case, right?
Oh, absolutely. Generally speaking, I try to think about the fingering sets, the tessitura, and like, is this really, does this key really fit, but it's still a push for the performer. Because a performer, some performers are like, they want to play anything, they don't care how hard it is, but then there's this other tier, I think, that's underneath that, that's like, okay, you can make it difficult, but is it practical in achieving this? Like, is there a replay value after playing something so hard that you still want to do it again?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I try to think about that register when I'm writing for solo literature. And I also think about the performer, and I think about, like I said, I think about the fingerings. Although I must say I don't really know those altissimo fingerings that well. As a matter of fact, everything after G, you can forget about that. I don't know them at all.
Well, in this case, with this piece, it all fell really well. I mean, that was all because it was relatively, it's basically scalar and mostly stepwise in that case. It all was so comfortable and really practical and challenging enough to just be rewarding and not deflating. So the chances of being successful was quite high. I mean, I think we felt that way about the piece right away. I think that was super effective. I think when we started working through the piece and reading it, even though I had a MIDI from you, that was essentially a violin sound. But it really just immediately resonated to me as a saxophone piece, mainly because of the way a saxophone can really articulate all those kind of rhythmic gestures in it. So I think we always felt from the very beginning that it just had such an identity as a saxophone piece, and that really is what inspired us to just get it in our programming and get it on this next album that we're doing. I have to give a shout out to two composers that I always think about. Please.
Tristan. I walk around singing.
It's totally in there. It's totally in there. I found it when we did this video session. I was just noodling through some of the licks again, just warming up, and I'm like, oh, wait a second.
I love that piece. I think
Well, it's
that
a great
piece is
piece.
just, and hopefully I don't butcher his name, Bernard Rand. No, that's not his last name.
You mean Haydn? No, Bernard Haydn. He's from
No, it was a piece that Sempman performed, and it was hard as heck. But there were some moments in there. It'll come to me. But there's some moments in there that were just wonderful in that piece. It's totally a tonal piece. Okay. But there are some moments in there that really, I was like, man, that's really cool. You know how he did it. He was another one that had these big old scores for everything. And so, but really, Creston is really my biggest inspiration for saxophone. So that's kind of my go-to piece. And I know that might be kind of bland because there's other great composers.
No. I mean, I think for a lot. I mean, I think for a lot of people. I mean, when we talk about like pieces you would send a composer to, that's definitely on the list. I mean, you're talking about an iconic work that sort of set the whole thing into motion in the late 30s. Absolutely, you know. So it was written. So you said it was written for your wife?
Yeah, it was written for my wife.
So what was So what does this piece mean to you in that in terms of
it was because it was my that's a great question. And there's another confession of sin. Professor James Aikman, Dr. James Aikman is my biggest inspiration.
He's the man. He's the man.
Yeah, I love that man. He really got me thinking about how to compose. He is that source for me. And he always wanted me to write more chamber music.
Okay.
And I, for 15 years, just would not write chamber music. It just didn't really speak to me. But coincidentally, there are two pieces that I wrote. My cello suites for Ethne Elliott, and this piece for my wife. So these are the only two chamber pieces really over the past 20 years that I've written, basically.
Okay.
And this was my first piece that I really wrote kind of for the violin. And so what happened was I started tweaking some things, and I remastered one of the recordings, and I realized the power of chamber music, because it's hard to write chamber music. It's hard to write a piece for a solo instrument and piano and keep everyone's attention. So it was really a start for me to really revamp myself as a composer, to really appreciate the discipline of writing good chamber music, because it's hard. It's one, if I got an orchestra, I mean, I got 40 colors sitting right there.
Right.
But if you're writing for a solo instrument and a piano, if it's a weak piece, it'll be noticed very, 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 very quickly. So it's definitely been a challenge.
Well, I think it came off really great, especially because each section of this piece, I mean, as the audience will hear, it's kind of it's its own character. You have that figure that keeps coming back, boo dot dot boo dot dot dee dot. You have that, but I think I described in my sort of off the cuff description at the beginning of the concert, I think I described there's so much I hear in this that just, I don't know, I'm just kind of reaching a little bit, but if we're talking about, the roots of a composer, I think about growing up in Detroit, just the unbelievable mashup of music that you're exposed to growing up in Detroit.
Exactly.
It's unbelievable. I mean, and you can just go down what's the international market? What's it called? Downtown.
Oh, Eastern Market.
Eastern. Yeah. You go downtown, you walk one block and you're going to hear three kinds of music playing in the outdoor restaurants, and the bars that are right there, and then you go through and it's literally just this, tapestry of everything, so I remember mentioning something like that. And then, it's just you can't escape the culture of Motown and all of that. I mean, so I just kind of hear almost like panels in this piece. What should the audience listen for?
So structurally, and this was funny because I didn't necessarily plan this way. So structurally, this piece is really a rondo.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I wrote it and didn't even realize it was a rondo. I was like, oh, this is a rondo. And basically the origins of this piece, there's actually another origin. Well, it was actually like a hip hop beat at first. And then I just had this motif and I just really couldn't work it. And then one day, Tammy had asked me for a piece and I had 8 days to write it basically.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, okay. And so once again, you can't really do much with a tritone. I mean, you can't really do anything with that. Like, what can you do with that? You can't really develop it because it's a tritone. It's relative within itself. So, but what I was able to develop was the end of it. And I was like, oh, I could develop that. That could be my syntax for everything. So, and that's what I used as that. So I took the tail end of that phrase and used it as my development structure. Because there's only, like I say, there's only so much you can do with a tritone.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I would hear that. It's interesting because, like, so in terms of sort of the stylistic influences, you move through, almost like a. So I think you listed it as a. Wait, now I'm kind of blanking a little bit. You list a section called not reggae. What do you call it? There's a section that you name it.
Oh, you talking about the Montunos?
Yeah. So that
yes.
So once that kicks in, and then like I felt like there's like a whole, to me, there's like an entire there's almost like calypso party music.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
exactly.
amazing. Like it's just there's like a whole like even. Anyway,
you're right, because I don't know if Ms. Cooner doesn't know this. So SLICE stands for soulful Latin and classical environment. So that's why it was like, okay, how can I take something like what I hear from Motown and hear, from Mexican Town in Detroit, and how can I place this into classical music? And that was kind of, like I said, the inspiration from that.
Almost like Afro-Cuban, influence. Yeah. Yeah, I heard all that. I think we started to kind of break that down and just our overall feel and vibe for it. It's like, we're just going to go all in on that, ba-ba-doo, dot, do, dot, 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 dot. You can hear everything there. So I think the audience will really pick up on that. It's really great. So I don't know. So for you as a composer right now, I mean, and you're someone who's so multifaceted as just a musician, period. But I think for our audiences, for the night notes, I mean, most of the time the programming is pretty traditional. There's a lot of conservative stuff sometimes. I think that goes without saying, especially when you're dealing with maybe traditional chamber music, string quartets and whatnot. And this is, I don't know, this is the third or fourth time I've been part of the Night Note series, which is really great. But I think for our audiences, it's important for them to really connect with the composer. And maybe a question I think that's important to our audience is, like, why does contemporary music matter right now? Like, or generally, or right now, or in this environment? Like, what do you think about that?
I think because programming it's so easy to program two people or a quartet. It's so easy to program chamber music, and I think this is going to be a renaissance of people really respecting and appreciating live musicians. I compare the situation to the Hughes strike of 1942, where no new music was recorded during this time because the AFM was striking because of royalty rates for musicians. Oh, sound familiar, right? Yeah. And so what happened was, if you notice TV, especially sports, like everybody was struggling. They were, playing 1982 badminton championships and bowling championships from 1969 on TV. Yeah. So everybody was clamoring for new stuff.
Yeah.
And we can't have a large orchestra. But wait a minute, I could play a saxophone quartet and I could broadcast that easily for social distancing. Yeah. I can broadcast a string quartet. I can even, a brass quintet. So it's like, wait a minute, we can make this situation work. And, and obviously your wife is a fabulous composer herself, and people are like, wait a minute, let's perform, her solo music or someone else's, string trio. Or maybe, hey, you got a piece for people asking for weird, like you got a piece for saxophone, for alto and tenor, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. There's an organization that promotes saxophone music. It's called NASA. Let's go ahead and pull some stuff from there and play for it.
Right.
So people are realizing that we can have a live performances easier. Just use the chamber format. So it's an unfortunate blessing that it came out of something such a pandemic during this time.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm grateful that people, are at least considering my music and a lot of my friends' music from Detroit, like, like say, James Lee or Carlos Simon or Armando Bajolo. And there's just so many more people I can name during that time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like, it's very possible that we have an audience here that's not actually very aware of the rich compositional history that comes out of Detroit. I mean, how do you see that? How do you see that kind of history?
The history is because it was important to me because, like I said, one of my mentors in high school, Ernie Rogers, was on the Motown Review and was a recording artist for Motown. Like I said, Patricia Terry Ross was a recording artist for Motown. Well, recording musician, I should say artist, but she was on a lot of those recordings. And she was first call sub for Detroit Symphony Orchestra. So these were my teachers that really helped shape my compositional career. They got me ready for Michigan. Of course, my band director, who I love always, Ben Pruitt, was really a motivating factor. So the teachers during that time, they were all professional musicians.
Yeah.
And a lot of them played with Motown, or they were first call subs for the symphony orchestra or the opera house orchestra. So we had certified performers that had albums out, concerts recorded that were around me. And I'm like, oh, wow. But you don't really know it at that time. Like Earl Van Dyke on thousands of records was the accompanist at Osborne High School.
Yeah. Wow.
And he has more records than everybody in the city combined. Yeah. So he's the accompanist at Osborne. Like so that history was very rich to me. And of course, I can't leave out the McKinney family and Marcus Belgrave. They were so huge. Yeah. To me, as far as my jazz development. And then, like I said, so once I got to Michigan, just seeing, the concert band, the symphonic band, and just learning about all this chamber music. I got a score right here. I didn't know what Daphnis and Chloe was before I got to Michigan. I didn't know about all of Tchaikovsky's other works. But then I got there and but I did this will make you laugh. I didn't realize it wasn't normal for a music school to have a library right there in the school. Most places don't have that. Right. And we just go on the third floor. It's like, oh, there's a library. Go check it out.
Exactly. The whole history of music is right there.
Yeah. And so to be able to sit there, hey, oh, what you playing? Who's that composer? Never heard of them. Okay, let me go upstairs and check them out because obviously YouTube didn't exist then. So our YouTube was the third floor library. So I'm very I can go on and on about my time in Michigan.
Well, sure, yeah. Well, Cass Tech, mentioning Cass Tech, I've played there a couple times. I mean, they're in a whole new facility, of course. I'm not sure if that new facility was there when you were there.
No, that was 2007 or 2005. Yeah, right.
Okay,
so the building I was in was the same building Center was in, that Ernie Rogers was in.
Yeah.
That Schofield was and like we all were in that particular building.
Well, even though I remember, I think the last time I was there, because I don't think I'd ever visited the original building. I'd seen it, but I'd never been in it. And, even though it was the new building, walking into the halls of Cass Tech, it's just like you're flooded with the knowledge of that history, the deep history. It's like, it was just like it just kind of like takes over you a little bit, you know. Can you describe your time at Cass Tech for us?
Oh man, like I said, we had 7 music teachers on staff there.
Wow, 7.
And it was just it was just a remarkable time. So you can imagine being 13, 14 years old coming in and you seeing I'm seeing Ali Muhammad Jackson on drum set, who until recently was the drummer for the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, you know, but he was doing that when he was 16 years old, and then his brother was just playing all over the place, Khalil Jackson, and then Marcus Belgrave's son comes and plays, and he's just killing it. And then you have other just great musicians all over. So it was just a magical place when you for music during that time. And then like you just sit there, then Alvin Singleton just winds up coming to your practice, or like I said, Harold McKinney, or Duncan came in one time, or not Harris, Don Mayberry come in. All these great jazz musicians were just coming to your practice, and you're like, it was just normal for that to happen. Or you know, Senta would show up because he's auditioning for Interlocking, and I'm like, oh my God, you're Don Senta! Like, I want to be like you. I'll never forget that. He's sitting in the practice room.
Just practice.
I just want to say hi because I want to be like you. That's serious. That's the first time I met Don Senta. He was in the practice room, and he came because he was recruiting for musicians for Interlocking. I'm like, oh my God, that's him. You know. And then you hear these stories about William Ravelli. You know, he was teaching in Indiana, but you get to ask, you know, Don Senta about, you know, his times with Ravelli, and I'm only like 14 years old. So, and you meet all these people, so it's just wonderful. But then, so you learned about literature, and I think some of the kids actually wound up going to Interlocking. Actually, they studied with you at Interlocking because you were teaching up there during that time. So it was just, my musical surroundings was just really good. So going from Cass to Michigan was just, it was just a wonderful time. But like I said, the cool thing about Michigan, like almost everybody there came from great musical backgrounds. Because like yourself, you coming from the Clinton Cannon School District, it was just like Jay, like Rob, they were just phenomenal. And then the ones that were coming from Traverse City or Grand Blanc, they were just phenomenal musicians. So it was just a great, it was just a great time there. And being there during H. Robert Reynolds' last years. And then like, oh, he's a Michigan alum too. You know, you don't necessarily know that while you're there, but then you find out that, you know, his history with everything. And because I knew Senta's history through Larry Teal, that I did know. I didn't get a chance, of course, I didn't get a chance to meet Larry Teal senior or junior actually, but I wanted to meet them. So you just learn all this history. You start putting all these pieces together. And actually, I mentioned Ernie Rogers earlier because Ernie Rogers was a Cass Tech alum, and he and Don Senta were great friends. And it was funny because they were actually together at Wayne State,
right?
And he even said then, he's like, oh no, Senta could play anything during that time. He was way better than all of us.
He was considered a virtuoso as a, you know, a world-class virtuoso as an undergrad. I mean, you know, and even coming out of high school. So, you know, so he was already playing on the radio.
So I see this like, oh, he goes to Cass, then he goes to Wayne State, then he goes to Michigan. It's like, I want to be like you.
Well, that's a nice path. I mean, that's certainly a nice path to just to see kind of laid out in front of you like that. Absolutely, you know, it's really great. Tell us what you're working on right now. Are you composing anything right now?
Wow. Yes, I'm finishing 2 other cello suites. Okay. I have a horn suite that I'm finishing up, and I'm also doing. I have a double percussion concerto, an orchestra piece I'm writing for Annie Stevens at Virginia Tech. Also finishing my second book, my second novel actually. Wow. So I got it's a lot on the plate. Just trying to keep up. So, and then I got a film score I'm writing.
Oh, wow. That's just, wow. How do you keep up with all of it? Plus full-time teaching.
Plus
Really?
full-time teaching.
Yeah. That's great. Wow. You'll have to give us tips on how we can all balance our time better.
No, man, I'm still trying to learn to get those fork fingerings memorized on.
There you go. You get them.
And then I was silly. I think I called a friend. I thought I could use teach the altissimo fingerings that I knew on saxophone, and kind of find out they're not just on alto saxophone. Kind of find out they're not the same on tenor. I was like, wait a minute, I gotta know a whole second set of fingerings.
Yeah. Everything
I said, wow.
Yeah, it's all basically like a step off for every horn, So it'd be like relearning a different keyboard for every member of the saxophone family.
So
yeah,
that's just been cool, just saying, but just like I said, I just love music. So just learning different things, learning what works. You'll be surprised how many people have to teach 1-2 side key instead of 1 and 1.
Right.
It's
well, that means you're a frontline worker.
Yeah. Every year I had to teach them. There's so many kids play B flat 1 and 1. It's like, no, do not play that unless it's approached chromatically or from ergonomically. Do not sustain 1 and 1. I would not allow it.
You're a good man. You're fighting the good fight. Well, it's great. Well, we can't wait for the audiences to hear this. I know Liz Ames couldn't join us, but I speak for her in saying that we love the piece. We can't wait to record it. We're so happy that we could share it in this format, with our audiences, with Night Notes audience. They can be looking out for the commercial release of that, very soon. And
Tim's being real humble. Let me just tell you about Tim. So I sent it to him, right? I didn't hear back from Tim for like 2 years. Next thing I know, it's like maybe 2.5 years. He's like, oh yeah, I recorded it. I'm like, what?
Well, no. I said we were I think we checked in. I found my email thread. I got back to it at some point, but I was like, I want to record this, and then the pandemic hit.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
He did say it, but it wasn't like, hey, what you think about this? It was literally like he did say he wanted to record it. I ain't hear back from next thing I know. Oh yeah, we recorded it. It's next week. Like what? But I'm not saying that, man. I'm just saying that was just a great.
Well, it's like
that was just a.
I kind of did want to surprise you, so I thought, what better gift than for this to like show up in your inbox,
That's literally what was cool. That's really what happened. It was really like I didn't hear from him. Oh yeah, we're recording it.
Okay.
Like that's like the best words you could ever tell a composer.
Well, I mean, it's in our rep now, and it fit perfectly in our project, even though it wasn't composed for our project, which is the whole series of these shorter pieces that we're doing that we're calling it Project Encore. So it's an entire album of works that are like 2 to 5 minutes long, and they're all interchangeable. They could be a concert opener or a concert closer, so like the idea that this is a piece like you could easily open the concert with Slice, and just really warm the audience up to everything they're going to hear, and you could easily close a program with it as something really light after maybe some like heavy closer, some heavy sonata or something. So it's really the ideal piece in programming. And in our profession for saxophonists, we need more pieces that are, number one, penetrable and also fun, but you know what, I think right now, in my opinion, audiences have shorter attention spans in a way that serves a 5-minute piece, a 3-minute piece, even. Like, I just think we operate in that way, and that's not to take away, this how important a large kind of substantial work is, but this piece fits perfectly for our project, and this is a piece that once we were kind of building this project and thinking about this recital, we thought about your piece right away, and I think it's just a piece that's emblematic of Detroit and your upbringing and our relationship, and I just think this came together so well, and we were really happy that you could be with us for this interview.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's just great. So thank you, and we look forward to.
And one day I'm gonna get some courage, and I'm gonna write a saxochord saxophone quartet piece.
All right, we'll get you on that. Yeah, you put Prism on our list. Put on your list.
Yeah.
On your, what do they call it? The dance card. You got to put Prism on a dance card. So, hey, thank you so much, Chad. Oh, thank you. So let's talk about Rise, and of course, apart from our collaboration and the fact that it was a commission for a specific occasion, like what was your inspiration for writing the piece beyond like our prodding and begging? No.
Well, yeah, I hadn't written a piece for alto saxophone yet. At that point, I had two soprano saxophone pieces, and so it's been really fun to have reasons to add to the repertoire I've been working on for saxophone, because I just think it's an awesome instrument. I took lessons for like a year when I was growing up just to get a sense more of like how woodwind instruments work and what it means to be an instrumentalist who breathes. So yeah, ever since then, I've just really had an awesome appreciation for the instrument. And going to the University of Michigan and hearing about your studio and seeing all the amazing things that your students can do, having you ask me to write you a piece, I just really felt like the sky was the limit in terms of what I could write for. So felt like a main impetus entering the piece was it's going to be virtuosic and fun, and just make them do a bunch of hard things. And it was really fun to write.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it fit perfectly to our kind of our project goal, and maybe our viewers, for them to have a little insight on that. Your piece was part of an entire set of commissions that are meant to either serve as like a concert opener or a concert closer. And I find your piece fits either one of those models. It has sort of the same characteristics I would want to find in either an ending encore or kind of a real just splashy opening. And we haven't, I'd have to say we don't have a lot of those pieces that fit that bill exactly. And I think your piece does it like remarkably, and it sits right at that kind of 5-minute window. And maybe we're at a point in time where that kind of a piece has maybe increased relevance because of the attention span of frankly our society. I mean, maybe in my opinion, sometimes a 3-minute, 5-minute piece can have a huge impact on a listener when it's contained and is kind of well paced as your piece is. Yeah. What was the process like writing the piece, maybe for our viewers?
I do a lot of my composing at the piano because I am a pianist myself. And so I always feel really at home when I get to write anything that includes piano. The piano writing in this piece, a lot of it, you'll notice Dr. Ames doing a lot of these sorts of things with her hands. They're right on top of each other. So they're doing these hocketing patterns of interweaving with each other. So I remember it just being a lot of fun to write that kind of style of piano writing, just because it's just fun to see what melodies got to pop out and interact with the saxophone line, and layering all the different textures. Even though there's just two instruments, there's a lot you can do with both of them. I tend to I call my composing process like slow motion improvising, basically. It's like I love improv. And so what I love about composing even more is that there's time to trace an idea and see how far it goes. And if it doesn't seem to be working, you can always backpedal and try a different direction. And I write down as much as I can and scribble things out. And it's all very fluid. My handwriting it's messy, but I know what's going on. So yeah, it's just a free process, very playful. And I think I finished it like right before COVID hit. So that's kind of crazy to think about too.
I mentioned this, I think in the pre-concert, in the actual speaking program notes from the stage that they'll hear. I mentioned it, that we got this piece, I think the last day we were in school. Like I remember getting it over lunchtime, the day before lockdown, and our plan at the time was to premiere it in May in New York City as part of a recital at Steinway Hall, and so it was really heartbreaking to have to table the piece, but it became essentially the anchor for us to do this Night Notes concert, because the Night Note concert for us both, it was the first performance for both me and Liz together. And we'd done some virtual kind of remote projects that was all really particularly trendy last summer, where everyone was doing, everyone was figuring out how to do split screen, video projects.
Yeah.
We did a couple of those, but that really gets fatiguing. And also it's fatiguing because everyone sort of has their take on that. And it's also something very, cold about it, because you're not really interacting with another person. You're just, as Matt Albert at University of Michigan would say, it's chamber music adjacent. You're studying and, you're each other's parts, and then you're just learning to line it up, essentially, right? But in your case, and with this piece, this was our first performance back after a year off together, essentially.
Wow.
And so it's really meaningful to kind of pull this piece out, which was the sort of the last piece we got before everything shut down. So, I felt like the title of the piece being Rise is quite apropos, and whether or not that was, certainly that wasn't in your thinking, but for me, it literally emerged and as a galvanizing point to return to some form of live performance. Yeah. So maybe what should the audience listen for in this piece? What would be some earmarks for them as listeners?
I would say right at the beginning, there's, to me, the opening theme reminds me a lot of like a French old movie, or like the
very much,
or like the score for Catch Me If You Can, which is like one of my favorite film scores. It's very like, it kind of frames that like kind of dark place of starting out, of like the mournfulness, and it's very short-lived, but it's still framing everything else that comes beyond it. It's not just we're immediately launching into very virtuosic music. It's framed from this place of, we're coming from a place of sadness, of looking inward, and there are a couple moments where things switch back. There's sudden character shifts where it gets fun and playful, and there's, bursting onto the scene at the end. And so I would also encourage the audience to listen for those sudden shifts, and how even once we feel like, okay, I think things are starting to clear up now, there's still all kinds of twists and turns. Like no progress is totally linear. There's still things that come in and out from out of nowhere. And I think this piece kind of captures a little bit of all of those things.
Yeah, I would completely concur. I felt like the piece opens almost in kind of a 20s cinematic, classic sound, and where it's hard to really identify whether, the sound is sits in a jazz world or a classical world. It's kind of mostly just literally atmospheric, noir film music or something, something about it, that melancholy, but you're right. And then it just bursts forth. And so I just think it has a little bit of everything for everyone in a short little piece.
Yeah.
So, actually, I found it because it was sort of one of those pieces that helped kind of jumpstart things again. Frankly, I found that in a short piece, I found that there was a lot of material that required just a lot of work. And Liz, she's not here with us, but Liz, as a pianist, knowing your skills as a pianist, she really admires your work just as a performer. And she kept saying, I think she made my part harder than yours. And she's like, why? Like everyone makes my part harder than the second part. And I kept saying, this is very hard. I'm finding this incredibly hard. Mainly because I just had to shake off all this COVID rust, this pandemic rust. I felt like I have to really get back to my chops, and of course teaching over Zoom and modeling and playing is just not the same. So I thank you so much for giving us a piece that helped kind of lift us out of that fog, frankly. So maybe another kind of direction for our viewers here, why does contemporary music matter right now? Or just in general? With the state of contemporary music and contemporary art, what's the case that we need to make for it now at this point in our history?
Yeah, that's a hugely important question, especially as everyone's wondering, like, what's going to happen to arts venues? What's going to happen to, these things that we're used to doing that have been institutions in our culture, and they just haven't been around for a year. So what's the point of going back, or what will it look like to go back to it? And I mean, when we think about our history as humans, so much of it is marked by what was being made at that time. Like we look back on World War II, or like, huge cultural moments. And one way that we're able to frame and process those things as human beings is what was being made. Like, how are people creating? Where was their mind at? And so it can be really cathartic right now in the moment of what is really happening. Like, how are people processing this? How can I look ahead? How can I look inward? Art makes you stop and think. And so much of our culture is telling us to keep going and push things aside. And so, especially music, as a composer, I have the power to make you sit in a seat for as long as I want you to. It's not a painting that you can just walk right by. And so I take that very seriously, as I value your time as a listener. And I hope that the experiences that I create through sound are ones that, take you on an imaginative journey or contemplative one, just as a moment to mark the moment that we're in.
Absolutely. I feel like every major artistic movement in civilization has been a reactionary movement to either some kind of world event or some kind of traumatic event. I mean, look at the Renaissance after the Middle Ages, and like the rebirth of society after these plagues and all these. So here we are in a very similar state. And I just think I tend to have a more positive, optimistic view than most. I mean, there's evidence that the arts could rebound in a very dramatic way, and it's just wonderful that a composer like you is able to position yourself, I think, to be more relevant than at any point in history right now, because we need you. We need you, and I hope that our viewers understand like how important it is for us to collaborate and for us to be championing the work of living composers. And I thank you so much for being a part of this, and I'm glad we were able to do this. Thank you.
My work is irrelevant if no one takes it into their hands and gets it out there. So it's a two-way street.
I think that's important for our audiences to kind of see. I mean, we just, no matter how we get, or no matter how much we try, we're still just really locked into the standard canon. And we may have some folks here tonight that really haven't interfaced on any level with a living composer of any kind. So if that's the case, you're the best introduction they could receive. So all right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being a part of this again. And I look forward to discussing all this with our patrons after the concert too. So